Hello, welcome. The week started with the Citron team kicking the bucket, bringing a development version that, at least in my case, fixed issues in several games. In addition, they implemented the 12GB STROM feature for the Switch, and I'll talk more about that with you. Besides that, Camille and Zephyron gave me early access to a new driver called MK1, which came to fix several graphical bugs on Android. And as a bonus, we'll have a new Android version coming soon. Starting with the Windows version, the experimental change to Switch's DROM for up to 12GB was implemented. This can bring more performance in some games, especially when using various texture mods and character replacements. However, not everything is perfect, my friends. This configuration can have negative effects on some games. For example, if enabled in Pokémon Scarlet, all the Pokémon will eventually disappear, and there won't be any Pokémon left on the map. Another game I reported issues with was Yoshi's Crafted World, which, if the DROM is set to anything other than 4GB, won't start. Quickly talking about this development version, which may have its changelog changed when released to the public, here's what I have to share with you. Besides the addition of the 12GB DROM, initial support for Unreal Engine 4 was implemented, which is very problematic for emulation. This implementation changed the way shaders are compiled and can now bring to life games that were previously considered incompatible. Citron is also making changes to the audio API. This means that, soon, we could have fully functional audio in Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. However, as the developer told me, the API still needs a little more work to reach this result. Additionally, I tested this new build on some problematic games, and let's see how it performed. But before that, please leave a like and share this video in other emulation communities to help the channel grow. And if this is your first time here, consider subscribing to the channel. If you've followed the recent tests, you know that Monster Hunter Rise had graphical issues in the city and during open-world gameplay. The image would flicker with some black frames, causing visual discomfort during long gameplay sessions. Using the 12GB DROM and this new version of Citron, the black screen issues were 100% fixed. The gameplay is now smooth at 60 FPS, but not everything is perfect, and there are still some graphical problems in the city. Since the gameplay in the city is always brief, you can already consider this game playable. As already mentioned, Pokémon Scarlet and Violet have issues when any DROM value different from the default is activated. I recorded this for you. After any battle, the Pokémon stop appearing at their original location. Even if you use fast travel, they won't respawn anymore. The solution is to disable VRM. I also noticed a small performance gain, making the game more enjoyable for those, like me, who play Pokémon with accelerated speed because they find the game slow. If you play at 30 FPS, you won't notice this gain. Regarding performance, there was a 14% increase, with the previous version achieving an average of 51 FPS and the new version reaching 58 FPS. Yoshi's Crafted World, in the last updates, also wasn't rendering correctly and showed a white screen when entering the levels. As you can see, this has been fixed, and now the game is in perfect condition. Everything is rendering correctly, and the gameplay speed is very good. The classic test with Zelda Breath of the Wild, although I don't recommend using Citron and instead suggest CMU, showed a performance gain of nearly 15%, going from 35 FPS to 40 FPS on average. Additionally, the stutters while compiling shaders are much smoother. Test it on your PCs and let me know which games you noticed a performance boost. Another test that's always very complex to run is in Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. First, because it's a game that requires many mods to remove that mobile game appearance. Installing enough mods to modify the game and make it in an acceptable condition to be played on most cases at 1080p on a monitor with a steady 60 FPS requires quite a bit of hardware effort, especially from the CPU. But overall, this new version didn't bring any significant improvements. Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, even in the Windows version, still has considerable issues, such as the blown-out audio. As I mentioned earlier, Zep is still working on improvements to the audio API, so before you ask if this has been changed, unfortunately, the answer is no. Overall, the game still runs perfectly but with these small audio problems. If it bothers you a lot, it's better to mute during the rift transitions. Once you enter the dungeon, you can unmute, and the audio will work normally. I believe we're very close to finally resolving this issue. Now, let's talk a little about Android. Stay tuned, as we'll soon have new versions for Android. Right now, I'm using the latest version available on the releases page. However, Camille and Zephyron sent me a new driver. Guys, stay tuned, as they will release this driver to the public soon. At the moment, I have it, but I can't share it, just do the showcase. And I'll go ahead and tell you, this driver fixed many issues, and I'll list everything for you. Speaking about the setup I used a ROG Phone 6 with 8GB of RAM and a Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1. Everything was captured with a capture card connected to HDMI, so there were no performance drops due to capture. Everything you're seeing is exactly as if you had my device in your hands. Starting with LEGO Horizons, for those who saw the last gameplay, which I'm putting now, the game had a lot of graphical glitches, no matter what driver was used. Now, if you opt for the MK1 and select high GPU accuracy, take a look at the results. Although using high GPU accuracy consumes more resources, because before the game was running at 1080p and now only at 720p, we can play the game without problems. Another improvement many were waiting for is that the excessive bloom in Mario Luigi Brothership has finally been fixed. No additional mod or configuration is needed, just add the new driver, and the bloom will be corrected. However, we're still not 100% free of graphical issues. Shadows still occasionally disappear, and other objects are still rendered with wrong colors. But anyway, it's much better than before. Unless there are serious issues, I assume the game is now playable on most devices. It's no surprise that Pokémon Scarlet hasn't been running on my device for quite some time. Although now the game suffers from some slowdowns, it runs at about 20 FPS during open-world gameplay, and in battles, it maintains full speed. I wouldn't consider it playable in this state, but depending on how badly you want to play this game, especially if you don't have a PC available, this might be your chance. It might also perform better on other devices, as I couldn't keep the gameplay going for even a minute. In the past, I also tested the Romancing Saga 2 remake, and the screen would go completely white. However, with this new driver and using high GPU accuracy, the gameplay is almost perfect. In the recorded gameplay, I was using a resolution of 720p, but the game could easily run at 1080p without major issues. There are still some minor graphical problems, with some objects flickering, but it's at least playable now. Zelda Breath of the Wild on Android stopped showing those random squares during gameplay, and now the game is rendered correctly. The water is fine with this new driver, and for better performance, it's better to use normal GPU accuracy. As you can see now, the game is free of major graphical issues, and I know many people have already been able to finish this game on their Android devices. Zelda Echoes of Wisdom still has some flickering objects, as it did before, and the purple effect on the rifts hasn't been fixed yet. For better performance, you should add the mod that you can find in this video, in the card. Otherwise, the game might become blurry in the dungeons. From what I saw here, there was no significant performance boost, but I noticed that the game is more stable and no longer crashes when starting or entering a new area. Lastly, Zelda Tears of the Kingdom also had the random square issues during gameplay fixed, and now the game is rendered normally. However, if you have a device with only 8GB of RAM, like mine, the game might freeze after a few minutes, forcing you to restart and risking losing your progress. I was also told that this driver works very well with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3. So, for those with more current devices, I recommend testing the driver as soon as it's released to the public. Now, quickly speaking about games that, for me, had little to no improvement. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, there are many reports that performance has improved, but this game still struggles on my device, freezing several times during gameplay, and I don't consider it playable. Similarly, Red Dead Redemption has always struggled on my device, no matter the settings used. However, I noticed that objects disappear less frequently, but there's still a lot of slowdown in the city. In Tomb Raider Remastered, the lighting issue still hasn't been fixed, whether you use the modern or retro mode. As for the developer version for Windows, it is already available on the Citron Matrix, so you can test it right now. As of the time of recording this video, the developer version for Android hasn't been released yet, but once it's available, I'll post in the community or create another video if there are significant changes. Unfortunately, for the MK1 driver, you'll have to wait a little longer, as I currently don't have permission to release it to the public. The development team is also working on the MK2 with even more fixes. Once I have both available, I'll make a new video. Thank you for your audience, and see you next time.